Hello, this is Dr. Bob Evans, and welcome to our podcast, Parental Alienation from Couch to Courtroom and Beyond. We will discuss the resisting and refusing dynamic, commonly referred to as parental alienation, how you'll know it's happening in your case, and what can be done about it. Parental alienation can cause stress and trauma in high-conflict cases. These podcasts focus on how attorneys and mental health professionals can support families and children. Well, welcome to January 2025. Don't ask me how that happened, but it did, and so welcome. And this is episode 31, I believe, and just kind of a little bit of an overview and things we already know about parental alienation. I'm actually surprised many times after I provide a testimony on a case, I'll be contacted by a therapist or a guardian or even an attorney or a mental health professional, and they want to talk to me more about the phenomenon of parental alienation. Or if somebody's a reunification therapist, sometimes they'll contact me and ask me questions about the phenomenon. And I've had people with 30 years experience as a mental health counselor who never really heard of parental alienation and know very little about it. And so I'm kind of inclined to every once in a while repeat some of the things that we already know about it so that this can be shared with people that are involved in cases around the country. Also, I would like to ask my audience, if you all have any questions or you have a topic you want me to cover, please send an email to Dr. Evans at drbobevans.com or Dr. Evans at naopas.com. Questions, topics that you'd like me to cover, I would really appreciate that because this might as well help you in any way that it might help you. So let's talk a little bit about understanding about parental alienation. And parent alienation occurs when one parent manipulates a child to unjustifiably reject or distance themselves from the other parent. This behavior often arises during high-conflict divorces or separations, dissolution cases, and can have long-lasting effects on the child's emotional and psychological development and being. So it's really important that courts, mental health people understand that this is child abuse. And there's a paper on my site that talks about why I say it's child abuse and how it's justified by the APSAC, the American Professional Society on Child Abuse, has their guidelines on what constitutes child abuse. Parent alienation constitutes child abuse, no matter how you twist it. So some of the key characteristics of parental alienation, and again, I apologize if I'm telling you things that you already know, but I do want to share this, and maybe it's a different way of looking at things. So one of the key characteristics is that there's an unwanted fear or hostility by the child toward a previously loved parent. The child exhibits unjustified fear, disrespect, hostility towards that targeted parent. And sometimes they get hysterical. I have cases where people describe the child's behavior as actually hysterical at being forced to be with another parent. The second characteristic that's important is the denigration. The child will consistently, frequently criticize the targeted parent without any justification. There are no valid reasons whatsoever for the child to be rejecting that parent. There's a lack of ambivalence. The child perceives the alienating parent, the favored parent, as all good, entirely good, and the targeted parent is all bad. Never had a positive relationship with that parent, never really loved that parent. And when you see some of the characteristics or symptoms of parental alienation where the child rejects the entire family of a targeted parent, grandparents, aunt and uncles, well, they never really loved that grandparent. Or that grandparent used to physically abuse them. You're seeing a lot of this allegations of abuse surfacing now in cases, and they're really serious allegations of like sex abuse. And when a court hears sex abuse, man, it goes into it's a nuclear bomb for a court case, and everything stops. The parent loses contact with the child. The child no longer has to be supposedly everybody says the child's now safe. And you have mental health professionals jump on this because the child says it happened. It happened. So therefore, we all have to protect the child from the alleged abusive parent. In the cases of, and just to be perfectly clear, in cases of genuine abuse, okay, that needs to happen. Okay, when you have genuine abuse, you generally don't have parental alienation. Okay, I'll say it again. If you have abuse, you don't have parental alienation. That's the end of it. There's a independent thinker phenomenon. The child claims the negative feelings towards the targeted parent are their own. Nobody told them to say this. Nobody influenced them to say anything like that at all. And what's interesting is I used to do custody evaluations, and the first thing out of a child's mouth was when they meet me and they sit down, I introduce myself and they'll say, I'm here to tell you what my mother and what my father has done to me, and I want you to tell you that nobody told me to say this. It's amazing. Or I had other cases, which is really interesting, where I actually give testimony on, where the child actually said, that's all I was told. Interesting. There's an automatic support, unconditional support for the alienating parent. There's no guilt. The child shows no remorse for mistreating or rejecting the targeted parent. One of the earliest cases I had was an 80 or 85-year-old grandfather came in, and he sat down with these two adolescent boys, and he looks at the boys and he says, okay, you hate your mother. I don't know why you hate your mother, but you hate your mother. Why me? What did I do? I mean, basically every holiday that these kids had, they spent it with their grandparents. And the grandparents, like typical grandparents, showered them with gifts and love. And now all of a sudden, they hate this person. And it was one of the very, very moving thing to observe of how these kids just sat there and glared at the grandfather. And talk about an absence of guilt. It's basically a sign of psychopathology, frankly. One of the characteristics is they borrowed scenarios. The child uses phrases and vocabulary that are basically repeated from the favorite parent. And you'll see this in documentation. You'll see this in court transcripts. You'll see this in depositions where the favorite or the alienating parent is saying things about the targeted parent, and the children in counseling and therapy will be saying virtually the exact same thing. The rejection of the extended family, I just touched on that. Basically, aunts, uncles, grandparents, they're all never loved them, never wanted to see them, always was forced to go see their grandparents, which is kind of amazing. So what are some of the causes of parental alienation? Well, one of the things we can look at is the whole idea of emotional manipulation, where the favorite parent will share inappropriate details about the marital relationship, about the other person that they knew, even the premarital information. You'll hear people talk about, well, the other person was a drug addict. I remember back in college, they smoked marijuana, so therefore they're drug addicts. Or they drink beer on weekends, so therefore they're alcoholics. And so there's this emotional manipulation by sharing information that the child really doesn't need to know. And in some cases, they're gross exaggerations. They paint the targeted parent in a very, very negative way. I mentioned this briefly earlier, the idea that there's allegations of abuse and neglect against the targeted parent. And again, there's typically no evidence. In most cases of parental alienation, family law cases that I've seen, in many, many cases, either the guardian ad litem or an evaluator are reporting what they heard from the favored parent. There's no evidence to show that the targeted parent did anything inappropriately, was abusive, was neglectful, but it was always, in many cases, reported by the favored parent. And so therefore, they run with the idea that this is what's happened. I have cases where there's absolutely no evidence. It's simply reported by the favored parent. And so the mental health professional says there's really cause here to believe that this has actually occurred. And so now one parent loses contact with the child for a very long time without justification. One of the characteristics is the favored parent undermines the authority of the targeted parent. They allow certain behaviors in their home that the other parent would disapprove of or would be critical of. And so they use that as a distinction between them. And then they'll come in and you'll see it reported in documentation. Well, they have different parenting styles. One parent wants to have rules and behavior, respectful behavior, whereas the other parent allows all kinds of freedom. So they create this environment where the child obviously wants the freedom and independence that they get with a favored parent, but the targeted parent has to discipline the child. Discipline, by the way, the definition of discipline is learning new behavior. It doesn't mean punishment or harming the child in any way. So if one parent disciplines the child appropriately, that's a good thing. But typically that gets twisted in the courtroom. Children subjected to parental alienation can experience emotional distress, feeling very confused, very guilty, very anxious, and very frequently fearful. And interestingly enough, fearful of the favored parent. And that gets missed by evaluators and guardian ad litems. In other words, the child's conforming to the wishes of the favored parent out of fear of survival in that environment. Very few people pick up on that. There's identity issues. The child struggles with their self-esteem, their personal identity, because of this conflicting perceptions of their parents. Think about what children do. Children put their parents on a pedestal. I learned what it's like to be a woman, a wife, and a mother by watching my mother. I learned what it's like to be a father, a husband, and a man by watching my father. And those roles become indelible inside of me. So if one parent is manipulating, emotionally manipulating, very negative towards another parent, that's how you parent. You learn how to behave like your parents. And they become very significant roles. Yeah, you can break out of that. That's true. It can be changed. But very frequently, that's how the child runs with that until some intervention occurs. Typically, you'll find children will have difficulty in relationships. They're challenging in forming and maintaining relationships with others due to trust issues, due to big ambiguity in terms of how do you relate to other people. And so there's a distorted view of what's normal in a relationship. So just basically sharing. So how do we address parental alienation? Well, it's professional interventions, right? Engaging therapists and counselors specializing in family dynamics might be able to help and mitigate the effects, but they have to be knowledgeable of parental alienation. A typical counseling, family therapy, individual therapy, documented in the literature to make it worse. It's not even a discussion anymore. It's documented to make it worse, and people see it all the time. And so when you go to court, what do you see? Courts will recommend counseling and therapy. And one party will argue, well, it's not working after 6 months or 9 months or whatever, so they do a different therapist. They keep doing the same thing, but with different people. It just doesn't work. You need somebody who really knows what they're doing in terms of reunification work. And there are people around the country that can do that. In severe cases, courts can intervene to typically, hopefully, take the child out of a situation for a period of time to modify the custody arrangements so the child can reestablish a relationship. Keep in mind that when we get attached to our parents when we're born, that attachment's always there. Yes, it can get into trouble, it can get distorted, it can get modified, but it's still there. And so it doesn't take a whole lot to unravel it, given the right kinds of circumstances. Parental alienation is one of those unique phenomenon, if you will, that requires both a legal and a mental health solution. The legal provides the authority for the court to order people to participate in a certain way and in certain processes, and the mental health people who know about that parental alienation basically can apply their skills to help the child reunite with the other parent. The goal always is to establish a expanded relationship between the child and both of their parents. It's very important. Mental health people can encourage an open and honest communication between a child and both parents, and that's the whole idea, is to help that child build that kind of a relationship. Parent alienation is a very serious issue. It can have very long-lasting effects on a child's development and well-being. Recognizing the signs early and seeking appropriate interventions basically is very critical. And basically, it's critical in terms of ensuring the mental and emotional health of the child. It's very important that we focus on this and we get educated mental health people, legal people, guardian ad litems who are either attorneys or mental health people really need to know about this phenomenon. And unfortunately, many do not. Well, I want to thank you. And again, please, any questions, any ideas for topics, please send me an email and I'd be very happy to address those. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. For more information on this topic, please visit www.drbobevans.com or www.naopas.com. We offer classes for both legal and mental health professionals to help educate them on the signs and strategies of parental alienation and how to move forward for a healthier environment for the children of divorce. Please visit www.naopas.com and sign up for our courses and use coupon code PODCAST for a 50% discount.